Let's make sure that, we start with an MVP. We make sure we test it, we test the market. You're always going to be kind of adding different features. You might do some pivots to some extent, but you have to at least get something out there and get it working first. And the other thing, and this is coming from a marketer, is don't pull the trigger on marketing too soon. So if you don't have a product yet, you can burn through all your cash if you get really excited and you start, pushing out all of the marketing that it's going to need. And especially, I think, with SaaS companies, because it's it's typically a pretty heavy lift, the marketing that's required for SaaS. And if you start to do that too soon, then, things are never going to be delivered in the time that you think they will. There's always going to be issues. I worked with a client where they had the front end and the back end development were happening in different parts of the world. And when they finally brought them together, they actually didn't talk. So that was kind of an issue. Had they been a little bit more conservative at the beginning in terms of their spend, they probably would have ended up in a better spot.
Hi, everyone. This is Joshua Hoffman and Alex Garashenko, and welcome to another episode of the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast, where we deconstruct the why and how agency owners found their success, and in Season 5, focus on how you support your clients and help drive ROI, and a dog whining in the background as well. Today, I have Diane Moura, the CEO of Zen Change Marketing, a full-service marketing agency helping SMBs with strategy, website, SEO, social media, graphic design, ads, email, copyright, and basically everything a business needs to get found. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
We get some people watching the video, but just as we start, do you want to show your dog, or are you like, no, I don't want to bother her right now?
You want to see the dog? Okay.
We always want to see the dog.
This is my COVID puppy. She doesn't like to be left.
That's fair. I understand.
The dog's in reach at all times. It's great.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I think you get extra bonus points on video for showing a cute animal. So,
you'd be surprised. Like the shorts that we get the most attention are the ones that like we're wearing something funny or like something like that, and it's just like that's what draws people attention.
To be entertained, right?
Exactly. So where I want to start is something from your childhood, and that is pencils. And the last time we spoke, you mentioned that you wanted to make some extra money when you were a kid, so you started selling pencils door to door. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and the lessons you learned from engraving pencils?
Yes, absolutely. Well, and this was back in the day when I don't know if it was because it was pre social media and parents didn't know any better, or if it really was a safer world, but letting your children go and knock on the doors of strangers, that was perfectly acceptable back then. So I wanted to make some extra money, and I was selling not just pencils, but office supplies out of a catalog and going and knocking on people's doors and selling product. And one day I sold a very nice lady, it was actually my very first sale. I sold her some engraved pencils because that was actually a thing back then. And so I took her order down very carefully and placed the order for the pencils, went back and delivered them to her door. And to my disappointment, she was very upset because apparently the name was misspelled on the pencils. So I went back and looked at the order, and it was indeed my fault. I had written it down incorrectly. So my dad, who was a really good salesman, I remember talking to him, and he'd been kind of coaching me on my little business. And he said, well, you're just going to have to reorder them. And I was just beyond myself because I thought, well, first of all, this is my brand new business. Now I'm starting out, losing money because I'm going to have to replace pencils. And I was like, well, why doesn't she pay for the replaced pencils? And he taught me a very valuable lesson at a young age that, the customer is always right. And you have to basically make good on your service promises. So I took that lesson to heart, and it's something that I think I've carried through with me for my entire life.
Well, okay, and I do want to ask, did you run into a similar situation? I'll say not with your current business. Let's use an old business. But can you just, and I know we didn't talk about this before, but do you have an example of when that kind of happened again and what you did?
Yeah, so actually, when I started my career out in corporate America, so I was doing consulting kind of all over the globe, and I was working for a large client. I won't mention the name, but a Fortune 500 company. I think they're actually a Fortune 50. And the company that I was working with, this wasn't my company because I was still relatively new in my career, but we had delivered a rather large tech platform to them that we'd spent probably a year working on it, and we were doing it was from strategy through to technology. We were basically automating an area of their business, and we delivered this platform. So the normal way for any of you who are in tech, which I know you are, is when you go roll out a new platform, you always want to test it, right? You like start with something small, you maybe pick one business unit, and they're like, no, we want the benefits right now. So we need you to roll this out to all 5,000 of our employees over a weekend, which we kind of pushed back, but not hard enough, and ended up agreeing to. Well, we rolled this out. There were some issues, some significant issues that basically kind of broke some of their processes. And I remember at that time, I had already been moved on to another project, but anyone who had ever worked on this client was called back to go and essentially live 24/7 at their office fixing this. And I mean, I remember sitting beside employees who were crying because they couldn't give the customer service that they wanted. And I was thinking like, oh my God, we did this to you. It was just the worst thing ever. And so the next time, I do remember, I think a couple of years later, that we ran into another client situation where they're like, we want to roll this out to everyone over the weekend. And I almost jumped across the desk at them saying, no, we will absolutely not do that. So sometimes you have to learn your lessons from the school of hard knocks, and that was one of them.
Who needs staging? Straight to production, right? That's we don't have staging for any specific reason. And I guess going to that part of your career, I know that you, and maybe this is one of the companies you were talking about, but you were the CMO of 2 successful tech startups. And feel free to kind of mention anything about them. But I guess my question is, like, what did you learn from those 2 businesses? Maybe what made them successful versus not? Anything that you want to kind of, whatever you think is the most valuable thing to talk about with those 2.
Yeah. So, I mean, the incident that I just described was long before me being a CMO at tech startups. But, one of the things that I've really seen with a lot of tech founders is there's a tendency for shiny object syndrome. And sometimes because, usually like a tech founder is a visionary. And so it's a lot more exciting to be chasing the next thing than it is to really focus on getting the thing that you've got working and, fully in production and then, marketed. So I think, a couple lessons there is just for kind of helping founders to make sure that, let's concentrate on what's going to be in this release. Let's make sure that, we start with an MVP. We make sure we test it, we test the market. You're always going to be kind of adding different features. You might do some pivots to some extent, but you have to at least get something out there and get it working first. And the other thing, and this is coming from a marketer, is don't pull the trigger on marketing too soon. So if you don't have a product yet, you can burn through all your cash if you get really excited and you start, pushing out all of the marketing that it's going to need. And especially, I think, with SaaS companies, because it's it's typically a pretty heavy lift, the marketing that's required for SaaS. And if you start to do that too soon, then, things are never going to be delivered in the time that you think they will. There's always going to be issues. And, I worked with a client where they had the front end and the back end development were happening in different parts of the world. And when they finally brought them together, they actually didn't talk. So that was kind of an issue. Had they been a little bit more conservative at the beginning in terms of their spend, they probably would have ended up in a better spot.
How do you gauge that with either a company that you're working in with the CEO or a client that you're working in when they want to go as fast as possible, they have shiny object syndrome, and that you don't want to roll out everything all at once or start marketing too soon? Where's kind of that balance struck?
I think it's, sometimes it's just sharing the stories, sharing the experience, trying to, give them that guidance and finding areas where you can compromise. So, here's some really cool things, but trying to guide them on, what should be core to our MVP. And then looking at and just making sure, like, I think, when you're dealing with a startup, marketing and tech really have to be working hand in hand, and marketing needs to understand, like, exactly what are we going to get when, and then let's be conservative and build some slack in that plan so that if it doesn't all come to fruition when we think it will, that we haven't already pulled the trigger on our massive launch event and everything. I mean, make sure that we just take that extra step and take a breath. And I know it is really difficult in tech because often, these are kind of guerrilla applications that are trying to, hit a market need at a very particular time. And it is important, like first mover advantage is a thing. It is important. So you might need to compromise on what goes into that MVP or what goes into that first release. And then making sure that the messaging around the marketing is aligned with what is actually going to be available when, so that we're not, we can position messaging of things to come, but, let's make sure we don't get out of alignment and start positioning messaging of things that are actually going to be a year down the road. And then, people start to use the product and find that it doesn't have those cool things that you mentioned. And then maybe it doesn't get the traction. So it really is a very delicate dance that's unique for every company.
Yeah, I found it interesting to help founders focus on maybe a subsegment of the market that may have that early need, and just to say, yes, you have this massive market out there, but we have something that's never existed before. We can't just roll it out to them. Let's find a smaller market and roll it out specifically to them, because they have very specific needs and features that can then be the core of the MVP, and then roll out to the others.
What you're stating, Alex, is absolutely spot on. And it's not just tech. We're not just talking SaaS companies. I think, any company, there is a very important aspect of TAM, or total addressable market, that you need to look at when you're launching a business. But there's also, to your point, where are we going to niche down, right? And there's so many entrepreneurs that I speak with. You ask them, so, what are your target? Have you gone through a persona exercise, whether you call them personas or avatars, whatever you want to call them? Have you gone through that exercise? Do we know who we're targeting? Do we know where to find them? Do we know, how they think? And that's some of the things that, we do in marketing, is helping founders go through that exercise. So there's that balance between, I'm niching down, but I know that the TAM is enough that, it's going to be sufficiently lucrative. But if founders will tell me, we are targeting, what's your geo? Well, it's global. Okay, let's pick a state to start with. If you're in the US, and let's test it, and because obviously if you start to spread your spend across too broad an area, then you're not actually getting, if it's advertising, you're not getting the repetitions, you're not really getting the attention of anyone. So it's really important to, let's look at phases. So the same way that you would want to have releases for tech, any startup, if you're launching, or any business, in fact, really, really niche down and get really good in a specific area. And then you can always radiate. And niching down doesn't mean, as you know, that you need to completely ignore every other opportunity that comes your way. I mean, if you can handle it, then handle it. It's just more about how you're going to market. Because I think people, especially early in their businesses, they're afraid to turn down opportunities. So they try to go to market and say, I do everything for everyone. And that basically means that you don't do anything well for anyone.
I feel like that, that I believe that so much. It's you have to be very good at the thing that you're doing and execute on it with a very defined process. And if you're doing too many things for too many markets, you won't have a well-defined process in any of them. And then essentially you become more of a reactor as opposed to an expert, and someone that can really guide the situation to success and be experienced in how that process works.
100%.
Yeah, and one other
I'm
thing.
gonna,
Sorry, I just want to.
no, keep
You
going.
said the
This
word
is great.
radiate. You said the word radiate, and I had a mentor that always said this phrase: penetrate and radiate. And I think that's I haven't heard other people use that word, but I feel like as an approach, you penetrate one area and then you can expand. I think
because
that's such a
then
valuable
now
concept.
the idea is if you're tackling that one market, whatever that niche is, if you're tackling it really well, now you're actually making revenue, right? So, and make sure that, get that profitable. And then now you can extend, now you've got some, kind of your infusion of your own capital that is able to help you radiate or expand into other areas. Because otherwise you're just going to end up, it's like you have to go for round after round after round. And then at some point, the investors are looking for their return. And now you don't have the latitude to be able to make some of those decisions and try out some of those things that you wanted to make because you're basically working for the investors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to keep double clicking, and if we sacrifice some other content that we were going to get to, I think this is really, really valuable. Everything that we're saying and stuff that we haven't really talked about too much. So this is super relevant for me because I'm literally in that process where it's a pre-revenue SaaS startup. It's part of an agency, and we're going through and a little bit of the first version prior to me joining was a little bit of a swing and a miss. It was really what I don't want to go too much into the detail, but it was not totally right for the market that we were trying to reach, and we're doing a little bit of it right now, and we're all on the same page. But I guess understanding everything that you're saying about having this vision and making sure you launch the MVP. You did mention pivoting, and obviously the value of the value of a startup is being agile, right? There's not as much red tape. You can move a little bit quicker in different directions. So when do you know it's time to pivot or change, whether it's the entire product, whether it's the TAM, or the niche, I should say, when do you know that it's time to change rather than just having that shiny object syndrome and be like, the lawyers really need this too. Let's build something for the lawyers when you're still building something for whatever other industry. So how would you approach that?
I mean, you're right. That is the balance, because it is literally so shiny object syndrome will tell you you're pivoting all the time.
Right, exactly.
You can't actually grow a sustainable business that way if you're pivoting all the time. So, if you look at, pivoting needs to be a very careful decision. It can't just be, there's this really cool thing over here. I think now we're going to be this. I think it's more of, you have to assess the current market, because there was obviously a reason why you decided to go with the original strategy. Is it something that, you saw a need and now that need for whatever reason no longer exists, or it's the competition in that niche is far greater than you anticipated, and now you realize that you're going to have to spend a ton of money and you might still not get traction even though the need exists. It has to be a rational reason to pivot, otherwise it's a future release.
Yeah. There's yeah, go ahead.
No, that's I think I think that's where the emotions really can come into play and possibly take you down the wrong path. So, sometimes as you're building something, you realize that, as you mentioned, the lawyers could use this over here. You suddenly find that, there's this other market. Okay, that's great. So now you have a decision. Are you splitting something off to go address that market? So are you going to go to market? Maybe you have an opportunity where you have the same technology, for example, and it does apply to two different markets, but they are very different because of how they would use it. So then your question is, okay, well, am I going to go to market as one brand or two brands? And knowing that, behind the scenes, I actually have the same basic tech, but, if I'm the attorney, I don't know, hypothetically, whatever the solution is, but, if I'm the attorney, I want to know that you have the best possible solutions to attorney problems. I don't care that it's a really great solution for doctors as well, right? Because I'm the attorney, so it's like, this old expression, like, what about me? What about my needs? Like, what? It's like when buyers are very self-centered. So, it's is it a pivot? Is it a partial, brand separation? Those are some of the valuation. But it's just, I think my recommendation would be to just approach that decision founded on, like, data analysis, strategy, and not just because something else looks cool.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I think that's super valuable. You had mentioned, like, if you're pivoting to another market or expanding to another market, are you using the same core technology? One of the ways that I've been kind of thinking about pivoting, and there's multiple ways that you can pivot, right? There's the pivoting into new markets, and then there's the pivoting into, I guess, like, where you spend your time. I guess that's the real question, is, well, you're pivoting where you spend your time. And some of the pivots that, just from our last year or so, we've pivoted into operations. So instead of looking at different markets, so there's kind of like, there's the strategy side, and then there's the like operational expertise. You could have amazing win on strategy. Like, think, for example, use an easy example, like when Tesla entered the market, right? They had something that was completely different than other car manufacturers. And then you have someone like Toyota, where they're fully experts on their operation systems, where Tesla is just kind of like, okay, like, we'll figure it out, we'll automate our whole plan, and then whoops, that didn't work, but it's okay because they're still increasing sales because they had the strategy nailed for a new type of market, for example. And I think that's something really interesting that we've come across with founders, is when they get to a certain point and they want to pivot. Well, you may do better instead of pivoting to a new market, to pivot into your operational efficiencies, for example, and get tight there, because while you're small as a startup and agile, you can spend the time to get the processes right. As you grow larger, getting those processes right becomes more and more complicated. There's more people involved. It becomes like, riding a surfboard as opposed to a large container ship, right? It's harder to move.
Yeah, trust me. I spent many years working in corporate America, and in some of the consulting that I did was, back in the day, it was popular to do what we called business process reengineering. And yes, moving a big ship around is a gargantuan effort. And it's a balance, right? Because if you need that nimbleness as a startup. So you can't go too far into the over processing, but there's a methodology that we actually run our business on, and that I know you're familiar with, and it's called EOS, or Entrepreneurial Operating System. And something like that, I think, can be a real game changer for a lot of businesses, whether, if they're SMB, whether they're a startup, if they're, SMBs and they're, 10 years in, there's still, I think, a lot of value there. And some of the key tenets are around, first of all, like, let's make sure that, we not only understand the vision of the company, but how are all of the KPIs attached to that vision? So, if you are, whatever your level is in a company, you should have clarity as to, what you're doing and how that impacts the overall company. And so if the executives have KPIs that they're trying to hit, and maybe they're bonus eligible, you still need everyone else in the company who is going to have a piece of those KPIs so that it can all be effective. And then there's another, I think, really important tenet that is called right person, right seat. That's part of that methodology. And I think that's an area where I think a lot of startups or SMBs in general can fall into the trap of building the organization around the people they have, rather than carefully building what the organization should look like, making sure that, if there's people who are on the team, that they are in the right seat or the right box to best bring their skills to the table. And in some cases, make difficult decisions that, maybe somebody that you have on the team is not the right person for any of the seats. And then, unfortunately, it's probably best to move on. But, in a sense, you're doing them a favor as well, because, if they are the wrong person for that seat and there are no other seats for them, they're not going to be successful in the company. So they probably need a fresh start somewhere
and be
else.
stagnant in their careers. Yeah,
exactly. And then just the discipline of having, the weekly leadership meetings and documenting any of the issues, and, making sure that, SOPs, which are, Josh, when you were talking about process earlier, document the processes. Like, we have a rule in our company that we've documented so many SOPs. We have hundreds of them, but we actually have a cool little AI bot that sits in a Slack channel, and so you can query the SOPs, which is helpful. But
that's so great. Yeah, I took that suggestion from our last call.
It is pretty helpful. But in addition to documenting the SOPs, make sure that there's an owner for each SOP and that you're updating them. And you're documenting the right things. So, we have a rule that basically says if you're looking for an SOP and because there's a question you're trying to get an answer to, and it's not something that, AI in general is going to, answer, like there's no point in creating SOPs for other software that you use that is available off the shelf, because, you can go to Perplexity or ChatGPT and you can ask pretty much most questions on how to use it. But if it's something that relates more to your process, make sure that it's documented. And if it's not documented, then you own getting it documented. Find the answer and create the SOP so that, because if someone's asking a question, there's a pretty good likelihood that they're not going to be the last person to ever ask that question. So write it down.
You probably gave me, not me, you seamlessly transitioned into exactly what I had like ready to go, which was SOPs and process. I know we were kind of tapping into it, but I was gonna be like, why are SOPs important to you? So
that's why.
Check off that. We're moving through this nicely. That's funny. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to ask next to you? That was a perfect transition. What I do want to tap into, because it is something that another thing that I wanted to talk about is like AI. You mentioned ChatGPT and AI, and I know Alex and I are like diving into this both for our separate companies as well together. We have a weekly call, and it's basically turned into like a ChatGPT call. But I guess I want to know, related to marketing, where do you see AI impacting marketing? Where is it going? How do you get a competitive advantage? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we are in our company, we're completely in on AI. We've really doubled down. Like you, we have weekly meetings where we have a task force in the company of AI tool testers. And so we have a plan when we get together each week, we kind of review, anything we've learned from testing the tools that we're working on. If one tool is going to replace another one that we were using previously, because everything's moving so quickly, that's a pretty high likelihood. Other tools that we might have come across that are helping other organizations that we might want to test for ourselves. I'm in a couple of different mastermind groups, so I have the opportunity to kind of bounce ideas around with other leaders, some specifically in marketing and some just other CEOs. And so we're sharing notes on, what's working for everyone there. But, AI is already disrupting marketing, and it will continue to do so. The balance right now is that, we're not, so content creation wise, it still needs oversight by humans. We're not quite at the point of, I haven't even seen that cute Saturday Night Live skit of, having 6 fingers on one hand, as much with with any of the the video and the images that it's coming out with. Although you can definitely see sometimes it's not perfect. I think I think video and images is lagging on copywriting, but you can't just get ChatGPT to write your blog and spit it out and put it on your website verbatim, for a couple of reasons. One is that it is, it's going to sound a little bot-like to humans. It's improving. And, if you use Claude, for example, I think Claude's a better writer than ChatGPT. But there's certain, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of these posts. If you look on our LinkedIn, you'll see some examples of, words that the LLMs tend to use. Yeah. And so there are certain identifiers where, you can kind of tell that it was written by AI. And the challenge is, from an SEO perspective, that Google knows that too, because, when Google made the core update last summer, One of the changes was to really focus more on value added, long form content, which not surprisingly is what actual humans would want to read. So you can absolutely use AI to assist with content writing. You can use it for outlines. You can use it for initial drafts, but you still need a human to go in afterwards and, clean up any of the bot language, as well as make sure that you're adding original value added content to that blog. So I think what it's enabling us to do in marketing is to create longer form content in the same amount of time that we used to create short form content, but it still does require some oversight. Now, we're still really early in the AI game. And so for anyone who is feeling like, either they're, I know I talk to some people and they just go and mess around with ChatGPT, they ask it a couple of questions, they don't like the answers and they move on. Don't do that. AI is, there's so many people are saying, I love this expression, it's as dumb as it's ever going to be. And it is getting smarter by the day, smarter by the release. And now there's a real arms race to try to, get everyone to, all the LLMs are trying to outpace each other. And then we're seeing AI being embedded into so many, both of the tools that we've always used, as well as, new startups, as we were talking about startups a moment ago, who are embedding AI into their processes, or having, other AI enabled SaaS applications that they're creating that are really opening up new avenues. And we're that's just at the level of content creation. So the next level for AI, which is available, but is still kind of being stress tested, if you will, I think from a business perspective, is AI agents or agentic AI. So that's where AI replaces humans. Now, those humans still need to be, or that the AI agents still need to be overseen by humans. But, if you look at the trajectory that OpenAI is going, for example, they've made it, Sam Altman's made it very clear that, they're going to agents. There's going to be, the ability to have companies that are made up mostly of agents. Like we're going to see within the next year or 2 years, unicorns that are basically a couple of people and a bunch of AI agents. So that is happening, and we all need to be aware. And I think it's an exciting time for marketing, because if the agencies who I think really embrace it and get on top of it the way we are, I firmly believe that we will have a competitive advantage. Because I've talked to a lot of other agency owners that are not quite there yet. They're not, they're still doing some things old school, and it's not going to be that long in the future where suddenly things change and expectations of clients are changing, because they're seeing what's going on with AI as well. So they want to know, how are you using it? How can you deliver more for my budget? Because I know you have these tools. So I think it's a great time to get on top of it. But if you don't, I think you're going to be left behind. It's going to be like, pretending social media didn't exist.
I always think like Google. It's like saying like, oh, I didn't want to use Google because that's cheating. It's like, wait like X years and everyone it'll be silly not to use it. And I think it's the same with AI. It's like, oh no, that's cheating. It's like, no, that's just a resource. And if you're not using that, you're falling behind. And I'm glad that you mentioned, you'll have these unicorns with a few people, because I've always had the thought that AI, if used properly, which you kind of went into pretty deep, which was great, is essentially a company in a box, or a marketing team in a box, or and there still needs to be that oversight, but it allows you and I'll tell you how I use it. Like, I have all these philosophical thoughts, and that's why I love getting into philosophy on this podcast. But I'm not the greatest writer, and what it allows me to do is it's not going to come up with a new philosophical theory, but if I pump in my theory notes, it makes me a good writer, and then it makes it a lot easier for someone to read. So I just think everyone, it's just this tool that makes people more efficient. For bad writers, it makes us good writers. You mentioned like AI language that it uses. I also wrote this like huge book about my grandparents and everything, and I was reading it, And I noticed it would use the same phrases. So like every time it would say cobblestone, like a gray cobblestone street, and I searched it, and it was like 7 times or something like that it said cobblestone street, and then I had to go back and I said like what words is this just using over and over again, and then I had a list at the end. And I said use one of these in this entire thing, change the rest. So that is definitely.
I remember like back in the day, so having spent so many years in consulting, there's a certain language that consultants would use, like leverage this.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's like, and there was all like sort of the buzzwords, and there would be jokes about it. Well, I kind of feel like AI has become like consultants using all that like consultant language,
data-driven decisions, and yeah, exactly. I always like yell at our team. Data-driven decisions is a real thing. It's just like overused, and now it's not, and it's used improperly now. So it's like, every time someone says that on our team, I'm like, oh, like be careful with the word, like use it in, like use the real thing, not just a term. So I know we're kind of getting to the end here, and now I want to talk a little bit more about your marketing firm, Zen Change Marketing, because again, part of our goal with this podcast is to build this referral network among our guests and promote collaboration and support. So can you tell us a little bit more about your business and the type of customers that you serve?
Sure, absolutely. So as you mentioned in the introduction, we are a full service marketing agency. So for a lot of our clients, we will literally just plug into them and become their marketing department. So we work with SMBs that are either in regulated industries, so specifically legal, healthcare, cannabis, wine, and spirits, or we do a lot of work with the trades as well, so plumbers, HVAC, et cetera. And we have a 20-member team, and we have been around for 12 years. We've got what's been really exciting about the business is we have a number of our clients who were with us from the beginning that, we've been able to watch them grow over the years, and that's been really exciting. I think one of the things that makes us different is that, like any business, I always use the expression that I'm sure you've heard that, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So, if you're just selling SEO, then when you meet with a prospect, you're going to tell them that SEO is the best thing ever, and that's what they need. But maybe that's not what you need. Maybe you need to be doubling down on social media and really building your audience there. And maybe you need to go all in on your personal brand and do more prospecting through LinkedIn. And those are all things that we can help with. So, when we meet with potential clients for the first time, we take them through a pretty extensive marketing strategy and evaluation exercise. So we look at what's going on with their personal brand, with their business brand. We look at, where they seem to be getting traction. We'll take a look at their website, their social media. We'll look at their competitors, and we share all that very openly with them. No compensation. We're doing it because we believe that it's more important to the relationship to make sure that we end up with the right set of services that's going to move the needle for them than to just, so like we have some people who come to us and they say, I need service A, and we take a look at everything and we're like, well, we could give you service A, but we actually think service B is probably going to be more impactful for you based on your market and what your competitors are doing. So I think they really appreciate that. And we try to use that as the foundation for our relationship with our clients. And, we do have the flexibility of, if as we're watching their performance, if there's some other things that are changing, or there's some things that we'll go back to the client and say, hey, we think we need to be doing, a little more of this, a little less of this now, because of these factors have changed, and we have the ability to do that because we're full service.
It's really interesting. And the way that you describe that, it sounds like you provide a lot of value. Where does that initial kind of discovery before you get to the engagement and where does the engagement start? Is that's something we've been talking with a lot of agencies about. There's the initial building the relationship and discovery. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so typically we'll have an initial exploratory call with a potential client. Because as much as, if you give me an attorney and you tell me they're, personal injury attorney, I've probably got 85% of their marketing plan in my head, right? Because we've worked with so many of them. But I don't have that extra 15%. So that has to be personalized. So we have conversations about, their business and what has worked well, what hasn't worked well, what resources do they have internally. So our initial meeting is we're basically capturing that information, and we're sharing some things as well, but we really want to make sure that we focus and target. And then we go away and we do our analysis, and we come back and we share that presentation that I described to you that kind of does a deep dive on their business and their competition. And then we come up with a plan for them. We're not give me a certain amount of money per month and it's all a black box and trust me, I'm going to get your marketing done. We're very transparent in the services. So we basically say, okay, here's all the things that need to be done. Now let's have a conversation about what you have the capabilities to do in-house versus where it makes sense to outsource, and let's look to prioritize. Because a lot of SMBs, if you ask them their budget, they really don't know. Some of them are attempting marketing for the first time. So we do need to have that discussion with them and say, look, if you have the people in-house who can, do your own video shoots, great. If you don't, we can handle the shoots for you. If you have your own people who can do social media, do social media, but then maybe engage us just to provide them with some coaching. Or maybe they're creating content, but they're not actually out there doing engagement. And, maybe they're able to do it for the main brand, but they're not able to do it for your personal brand. Because that's like a kind of as the founder, you should be top of funnel for your business. And, so maybe that's not their capabilities. And so then we have a very open conversation with them and we prioritize into phases. And then usually that will lead to the engagement.
And then I guess my last question, although I said that on my discovery call and then I went on to do like 8 more questions. So, so I gotta stop saying that, I think. But in addition to helping clients, a lot of marketing agencies will partner with other agencies because, at the end of the day, there are so many different type of services within marketing, whether, SEO all the way to MarTech, that it's hard to kind of cover all of them. So, how can you work with other marketing agencies, or what services can you partner with other agencies? So in other words, what do agencies tend to reach out to you for?
Yeah, so we're, if there's agencies that offer, one of the services, so let's say, there's an agency I was speaking with the other day, and they're more of a high-end creative agency. So what they really like to do is a graphic design. They do a lot of, in-person activations, that type of thing. But they don't do websites, they don't do SEO. So that's a perfect partnership when we can do that. We, on the other hand, don't do the in-person activations, and, we don't do events. So that would be an area where, certainly we would look to, if that was an opportunity, we would look to other agencies to help with. So we're not doing the, the feet on the street. We'll coordinate that, but, we're just not, we don't have the manpower to go and do that ourselves. So that's an opportunity. And then the other place where I see agencies should probably collaborate more, and it's more as referrals, is if someone comes to you in an industry that's not your sweet spot, you could end up really spinning your wheels trying to learn that industry and, get up to speed and get your team ready. And it is stressful for your team. And I know from experience, because we used to try to be, all SMBs, and we had just such a wide variety of industries that we supported. And every time you get a new client, sure, it's exciting. And I'm not going to say, sometimes we do get some that are, a little bit out of our, out of our regular sweet spot, but, then we just look at, is this something that we think we can handle, and it's not going to put too much stress on the team. And it's something that, that we know that we can be successful at, because I think that's something that, we talked earlier, even for startups, of the importance of niching down. It's the same thing for agencies. And I run into so many agency owners who honestly, I think, make that mistake of trying to be all things to all people. And if you think about the difference, so I use the example of with an attorney, if you introduce me to an attorney, I already know most of their marketing plan in my head. My team knows most of their marketing plan. We absolutely hit the ground running. So that is far less stressful, ends up being honestly more profitable for your agency, because your team's not spending probably way more than the allocated budget to try to learn that industry and figure out what's going to work for them. So I think that's a great place for agency owners to really collaborate is, niche down. And if everybody else is niching down, and then if you get an opportunity that's not in your sweet spot, that would be a really good referral.
No, I think that was perfect. I think we hit on all the topics that we really wanted to. And as we come up to the end of the show, I just want to give you an opportunity to mention how people can find you and anything else you'd like to end with.
No, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, and my just Diane Moura, Diane, last name Moura. And you can also find me through our website, which is zenchange.com.
Perfect. And thank you so much for coming on the show. And for those of you who have learned something new from this episode, please consider giving us a like or a follow so we can continue getting the highest quality guests. And as always, thank you for listening. Deanne, I think this was like one of the most, what's like the right word? Informative episodes that I think we've had in a long time. And you made my job so much easier, our job easier, just by like giving these like really detailed, good answers. So thank you so much.
Yeah, on this and on the discovery call, we were able to dive deep. So I'm really thankful for that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you both.
Thanks for listening to the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast. I hope you got a ton of value out of this episode. And before we go, I just want to thank our sponsors, DevNoodle. DevNoodle provides marketing agencies with the ability to offer their clients unlimited website design, build, and management services with fixed monthly plans. If website design, development, and maintenance is holding your agency back from growing, please reach out to us at devnoodle.com, where we make websites easy for you and easy for your clients. devnoodle.com.